talk to the federal opposition and get their response to Ford's announcement, and we're joined by the Coalition spokeswoman for Innovation, Industry and Science, Sophie Mirabella. Sophie Mirabella, thank you for joining us. A bit of a shock yesterday?
Yes, it was, and speaking to other players in the industry, even though there was murmurings and talk from analysts for some time, no one really expected it to happen the way it did, and no one really thought that they'd be taken by surprise. But it is a shock, and not just for the 1,200 workers at Ford, but potentially for thousands of workers who work for component manufacturers who primarily supply to Ford, and Victoria particularly will be hard hit, and those people are going to be having a very difficult weekend.
Why do you say it's a shock? It's been coming for several years, hasn't it?
Well, unless you run a company and really know what's going on, and with a multinational, what their relationship is with the parent company, you can't really make those sort of predictions, and it really shouldn't be for members of parliament or ministers or shadow ministers to start predicting what one particular company will do or will not do.
It should be, though, when there's taxpayers' money involved.
Look, our responsibility is to ensure that we make strategic investments and help where we can in strategic industries. And for a long time, both sides of politics have agreed that the automotive sector is a critical part of the manufacturing sector for all sorts of reasons. The real question is, what is the best way of ensuring long-term viability of the industry?
Okay, so what is that best way? Holden has come out very emphatically this morning saying they need a swift response. They need clarity and cohesion going forward. As, you know, maybe a couple of months away from taking government, what would you be offering Holden and Toyota?
There are several key differences between the coalition and the government. A key difference is certainty of policy. We have said to the industry, when we sit down with you and we develop policies going forward, we're not going to change them, because we have seen the issue of sovereign risk be raised, because the government told the industry they'd make all sorts of investments, including the green car innovation, only after an election to axe that without so much as a phone call. And when you're part of a global company and a multinational parent sees that, they think, well, we can't really believe or rely on the assurances or policies of a government. So certainty and stability of policy is key.
But doesn't that also depend on the companies? I mean, Ford has been criticised for dithering around what their presence in Australia could mean. A number of industry commentators have said it's been their fault, not the government's fault, in the way they've approached this.
Well, governments can't control what companies do. They can create an environment that makes it easier or that makes it harder. But the issue of sovereign risk was raised not by Ford but by Holden, by Mike Devereaux, because you can't really run a modern economy by promising one thing to industry and then allowing them to invest billions of dollars and then doing the opposite. So that's very important, to provide that stability. And we have said for some time now that we want to have a better way forward, and that means that we have to have a Productivity Commission review to come up with a better funding model that looks at long-term viability of the industry, because currently the funding model isn't working and it needs repair, and we're aimed at looking at the long-term viability, not short-term fixes.
But we had lots of time, both sides of politics had lots of time to grapple with the future of this industry. It seems that time is of the essence, and certainly Holden wants specific guarantees. What has the coalition said to Holden in the last 24 hours?
Well, time is of the essence, and we've been in continual dialogue with all the companies, and I only spoke to Holden yesterday. The announcement at Ford was made yesterday.
That's right. And, so what did you say to Holden yesterday?
Well, we had confidential discussions, and we will continue to have those discussions. And the announcement was made just yesterday, but we will give them the certainty and stability of our policies, and they can rely on what we say to them.
Would you put more restrictions on taxpayers' money being used to help this industry in the next few years?
We have said that new rules need to be drafted, new benchmarks need to be developed, and a focus particularly on the export market should be part of that, and it will be part of the project of the Productivity Commission working with the industry and with us to develop that.
And what if the numbers don't stack up? What if the models are not viable? Will you bite the bullet and let the industry fall on its own?
Well, I don't think that will happen, because I do believe manufacturing and the auto sector do have a viable future. For example, we look at the automotive aftermarket industry. 80% of those companies actually export, and there are manufacturers in other sectors. There are auto manufacturers that export. I do believe we can have a viable, thriving manufacturing sector, and if you looked under the last coalition administration, employment in the auto sector grew by 22%, investment in R&D grew by over 174%.
So there is hope?
Absolutely there is hope, but we've got to do what we can to cut the cost to industry imposed by government policy, give certainty for funding programs and certainty for government decisions and policies.
That sounds like curious hope, though, 24 hours after we heard Ford make that big announcement. So
well, it's not curious hope. It's happened before and it can happen again. All major performance indicators under the previous coalition government improved, and all under the last 5 years have not been as good, and some have decreased significantly. It is a challenging
times,
environment.
Though, last couple of years.
Well, it is, we're talking about the last 5 years, it is a very challenging environment for manufacturing, which is why there's an absolute imperative for governments to look at their policies that add to the cost of making something in Australia and make our manufacturers less competitive.
Thanks so much for joining us, Sophie Mirabella.